Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Petey Performance Podcast. I'm back in Ireland, a solo episode for you guys today from the great Roscrea in County Tipperary. So excited to be back, but no prizes if you've guessed correctly. It is absolutely pissing rain outside, but good to be back to the green fields of Erin once again, nonetheless, and get stuck back into some work. So a solo episode for you guys this week before a couple of very big guest episodes, which will be very, very good, very, very interesting, and which I'm excited about. But a lot going on since I've come home, and I'm sure some of you will probably follow me on Instagram and will have been keeping up with my travels and my journey home, and you will have seen that I had a bit of a mishap on the journey home in that I couldn't find my compression stockings or leggings, and I always wear them because I have pretty bad varicose veins thanks to all of my ancestors or my family, my dad side of the family or my dad's side of the family. For that, it's hereditary, but it's about time that I get them seen to, because I couldn't find the stockings, and unfortunately then I woke up in the middle of the first flight to Dubai and I had a pretty severe pain in my calf. Manageable, kind of felt like a cramp, but I was like thinking that's a bit weird considering I've been just sitting down falling asleep for the last 5-6 hours. So I got up, walked around anyway, did a few calf raises, did a few stretches, and just stood up for about half an hour just to stretch the legs a little bit as they recommend. Stayed hydrated, drank a load of water. I don't actually consume any food on planes. I'm not sure if I mentioned that before on the podcast, but it's the best way to beat the jet lag, from what I've found anyway. I've done a lot of long haul flights over the last 10 years, and it's the only way that I've found useful to beat the jet lag, and it did work this time around as well. But when I got to Dublin Airport, the pain was still there, and it was actually probably a little bit worse when I stepped off the plane and walked in to meet my dad and my sister. So we went, got something to eat, and I kind of said it to them, and they said, that's a bit strange, you should probably look it up. So I looked it up, and it said economy class syndrome, which is pretty common apparently, but I said that doesn't sound too pleasing and it's a little bit worrying. And I was actually thinking about poor Matthew McGuigan from Tyrone, who came over to Sydney to play with Cormac McAnallans, and in that tragedy, tragically lost his life to a blood clot. And I was thinking, with my varicose veins and my family history, I should probably go to the doctor to get this seen to. So went to the doctor. He said he'd have a look at me, did a bit of an exam, physical exam, said everything looked pretty concrete, pretty okay, but he's going to send me to the hospital for some further tests. So went to the hospital, they did some bloods, they then did an ultrasound, and they found that I had a blood clot superficially. So they said it was a good job that I did come in and get seen to. So yeah, grateful that I did go in and caught it in time. They put me on blood thinners, so which is quite strange as a 29-year-old to be injecting blood thinners daily for a month. But as I said, grateful that I was able to catch it in time, and I wouldn't have thought of it other than that tragedy in Australia. So, yeah, pretty profound that it can go either way, I suppose. And I definitely will remember to wear those stockings in future, and I won't take that chance again. So back to Ireland anyway, straight back into work. Was meant to have actually a podcast episode recording last Wednesday when I arrived. Just as good I didn't, because I had to go into the hospital obviously. But we have planned a few more guest episodes in the coming days. I'll be travelling the length and breadth of the country to bring you guys good episodes, and episodes that will offer a lot of value to you guys, hopefully in terms of the content from our guests as well as the content from myself and what I can offer. Hopefully, I know that a lot of long-term listeners have told me that I can offer some value, so I'm grateful for the opportunity to, and I'll always endeavour to do my best to do so as well. So that is the major plan since I've got back. That is one of the primary reasons that I got back, is I wanted to get back to some consistent scheduling with the podcast. And I wanted to really have a crack with the Backdoor Cut and have a crack with the Petey Performance podcast. And I felt I needed to be here to do so, given that the championship is just after kicking off this last weekend. And we had a fantastic fixture on our team between Cavan and Monaghan, which went the way of Cavan. I don't think football's in a bad place at all. I think we can stop trying to change the rules here or there and try and improve the sport constantly. It's probably a case that we could probably gain more from subtraction and taking away rules. The only rule that I would probably be more stringent on, as I've outlined on the Backdoor Cut, is probably the black card rule and the cynical foul rule. I don't care where you are on the field. I don't care what minute of the game it is. A cynical foul is a cynical foul, whether a player is brought to ground or not. It's stopping an attack and an opportunity for a scoring opportunity. And a cynical foul warrants a black card as per the rules, so it should be a black card. So I think when we say we're missing a trick in terms of the rules and the rule changes, I think what we're actually missing is a trick in terms of the implementation of the rules. Now, I know the refereeing is a hard job, but that's what they need to double down on, I think. They need to train up better young referees that are capable of keeping up with the play if they're not going to go down the road of potentially adding in another referee to play. But that's enough of the GAA talk, I suppose. There's going to be a lot of that in the coming weeks, and I know a lot of you guys come for that, so I'm not going to stop talking football, stop talking hurling. And I better actually mention as well the hurling final before I move on. Clare and Kilkenny, I made the decision not to go to Thurles for it because my sister said, sure, that'll be sold out. And obviously, I don't know why I took her word for it, but it was not, because it's a league final. And then it was an absolute cracker of a game, and I'm raging I didn't go down. The standard of hurling on show was class. Clare coming away with the win, so I would have preferred to be there with Clare winning and Kilkenny winning. But yeah, I'm raging I didn't go down, to be honest. But the GAA keeps serving us up great fixtures and great games, so hopefully as we come into summer there'll be more of those for us to watch and for us to enjoy, and hopefully we will continue to see more of the highlights and we'll have more availability to watch the fixtures, not only behind the paywall of GAA Go, but potentially it'd be worth purchasing that service were the quality of the matches not so poor. Like, I was watching the quality and the highlights of the Galway and London game and the New York and Mayo game, and look, I have to say the quality was not up there. It probably left a lot to be desired in terms of the replays, in terms of the camera angles. Now, I know they're abroad and I know they're further afield, but the GAA have enough money to invest in delivering a better quality product. The product, as per the standard of football, is good, but the viewership looked like something from the 1990s, and I don't think you're going to be able to sell people on purchasing the service of GAA Go or paying for those fixtures if that's the quality you're going to deliver. You need to upscale it, you need to deliver high quality content, and then people won't have any qualms around, well, look, we're Irish people, somebody's going to complain about paying for it, but if it's a higher standard of a spectacle due to the video and due to the production quality being better, then there's going to be less of an argument to be made in that regard. So I think that's something that they could work on. And I think that's something that they should work on, because that's something I'm always focused on with the podcast. Is I'm always focused on making the content as clear as possible, making the visuals as clear as possible, making the audio as clear as possible, and making the way that I speak as clear as possible, and the avenues that I go down being as concise as I possibly can in those avenues as well. Because if you deliver a high quality product to whoever your fans are, or whoever your consumers are, or whoever your listeners or your viewers are, then they're going to be more likely to come back a second time. If there's any sort of blip and if there's anything that they're not too keen on and they don't enjoy, just laws of percentages and people, they're going to be less likely to come back. So that's one thing about consistency as well. One thing and one reason that I wanted to come back to Ireland to be more consistent is I want to offer a consistent, high quality product week after week for both the listeners and the viewers of the podcast. and as well as that, my clients as well. And I know that I was doing a really, really good job over in Australia, and we were getting people back to play, and we were getting people on calls in the evening, which actually suited them pretty well. But if I want to do any in-person stuff, I have to be here because the majority of my client base are here. And that is something that I'm toying with, or not toying with, it's something that I'm planning in the coming months. Is I'm planning on maybe heading to different areas of the country, doing some client events, and maybe doing some in-person coaching with some clients, previous clients that want to do in-person sessions, because that is one request that comes in constantly from people, is they want to do more in-person sessions, be it speed, change of direction, game speed, be it rehab, return to play. It is in demand, so therefore I should be going to different corners of the country. The idea is I might rent a field or rent a space or ask a club if I can use their facility. They're probably going to ask for some sort of fee. That's no issue at all. And then just set up there for the day, do 4 or 5 back-to-back sessions, similar to what Alan Murdoch, when he came over to work with some of his return to play athletes over here. And yeah, just travel around, hit up Connacht, hit up Galway, hit up Ulster as well, because I have a decent amount of clients up there too. Obviously up to Dublin, and then down south, probably as far as Cork, but maybe if you guys want to make it up to Tipperary, we could do it here as well. And I have had some requests from people in Tipperary to do some game speed sessions, so that's going to be class, and I'm looking forward to that. The Midlands is the place to be, I suppose, so you should be all making it to the Midlands, and we would welcome you with open arms, despite potentially what has been said to media in recent months, but I won't go into that at all. So what else has been happening? In terms of clients, I've been thinking about a lot of things, and it has been a challenging period for both me and my clients. It's not always plain sailing. You don't have a magic key to unlock the antidote, or whatever you want to call it, to getting people back to play as swiftly and easily as possible with no blips whatsoever. There are always blips. There are always speed bumps on the road to recovery. And that's something that clients, I suppose, struggle with from time to time, because they think that it's going to be plain sailing and they think it's going to be linear. The second they sign up, you're going to go from point A, where you're off feet, you're in pain, you're struggling, and you've been in that state for months, years maybe, and then they think it's just going to turn around and go week by week until they get back to playing and back to competing better than ever with absolutely no pain whatsoever. And although I would like it to happen like that, if it did happen like that, I'd be a millionaire. It doesn't happen like that, unfortunately. I do pride myself on the rate at which I can get people back to play, and the rate at which I do get people back to play and out of pain. But sometimes there is a discrepancy between what is expected from the client and what is probably expected from myself as well. I put pressure on myself to try to get the client back as soon as I possibly can, but as conservatively as possible. Although some practitioners will probably say it is slightly aggressive approach, in that I try to get them back on the pitch as early as possible, and then once they're back on the pitch, the process is a little bit more extensive from there on. As well as that, with such a heavy emphasis on the high speed actions of the game, where they're typically becoming injured or where they're at highest risk, we have to be quite conservative in our approach to progression, because we're starting, obviously, accelerating with max intent maybe at 5-10 meters. We might throw the sleds on as well. And then I want them to be confident of sprinting distances that far exceed what they're going to experience in the game before I let them back to play. Because as we saw with that chance for Monaghan, I think it was, or was it Cavan at the weekend, sometimes you will be expected to sprint 80 meters up the field, sometimes with the constraint of the ball as well. You're soloing, or in defence, you mightn't be having the ball at all. You might be just sprinting after someone hell for leather to try to prevent a goal scoring opportunity, so you can keep your team in the championship, or so that you can prevent yourselves from being knocked out, I guess. So that is going to happen from time to time. So my perspective and my model for rehab and return to play is I want to get them up to speeds that are greater than what their max speed was previously. I want to expose them to distances and total volumes in their speed work that are greater than what they've been exposed to previously, because if they can tolerate that, they're going to be more likely to be able to tolerate match demands and training demands down the line that aren't at that level or aren't at that volume or aren't at that intensity. Principle of anaerobic speed reserve: if you can tolerate a given intensity or given velocity, any velocity underneath that is less than that is going to be more tolerable and easier to tolerate than it would be if your max speed was lower, because it's a lower percentage of that total max speed. So if your max speed is 9 meters per second, then 7 meters per second is going to be a certain percentage. But if your max speed is 8.5 meters per second, then 7 meters per second is going to be a higher percentage of your max speed. So it's going to be less tolerable. It's going to fatigue you a little bit easier. So in regards to my work with clients and the challenge that they're presented with, or the challenges that they're presented with, sometimes it's flare-ups. Sometimes it happens because they maybe participate in a little bit more volume of team training that is recommended. Sometimes it happens because they push through the pain a little bit more than they should. Sometimes it just happens as well. Sometimes their recovery mightn't be at an adequate level. Sometimes they might be just getting stressed. Sometimes it could be something innocuous and something that they don't even notice. And then, unfortunately, they get a little bit of a flare-up. But the most important thing with a flare-up is, let's get you back to baseline as quickly as possible so that we can restart the process of loading you, so that we can elicit the body and the tissue to adapt, so that we can get you back to where we wanted to get you to, which is the more robust, stronger, more powerful, faster, better athletes in better condition than you were previously when you did get injured. And we have to keep that in mind, but we can't try to push through that. We need to rest and we need to recover for a short amount of time before we start to load up. And sometimes athletes get frustrated, which is completely understandable, when they feel like they've gone 2 steps forward and then they have to go 1 step back. But sometimes you do have to go 1 step back if you're going to get back to play. And sometimes that will help you to get back to play faster, which is something that they don't understand, because oftentimes they just want to power through. And look, if I was an athlete, and I was, and hopefully I will be soon again, I would have been like that as well. I would have been very bullish and I would have tried to drive through it and push through it. But with a lot of the injuries that are coming to me and a lot of the athletes that are coming to me with chronic issues, the very thing that they need to be able to do is relax a little bit more rather than grinding through it. And as a result of that being the end goal, they have got to relax a little bit more in terms of their effort level in those training sessions too. Something that I'm seeing with a lot of the chronic issues, be it osteitis pubis, be it a chronic hamstring issues as well, which I'm seeing a lot of, is there are 2 sides of the spectrum. There are those that are quite bouncy and are upright and real relaxed and maybe have more distal pain because they put an awful lot of emphasis on the swing phase or the terminal swing phase of the process of sprinting. And as a result, there's heavy eccentric load on the hamstring, or a lot of eccentric load on the hamstring. And then there's the other side of it with the athletes that are more over-rotators that strike in front of their centre of mass and try to just grind their way and muscle their way through the movement. Both can lead to, not will lead to, but can lead to some pain in the hamstring, because the hamstring is being loaded so much. In the initial one that I described, because the hamstring is almost pulling the body forward by retracting itself backwards and back against the ground, and because potentially the body hasn't been projected optimally by other tissues such as your glute max, or potentially your rec fem isn't strong enough on that initial contact phase, or potentially just the way that you're moving is putting a lot of stress on the hamstring. And I've seen a couple of cases like that in the last 6 months. It's experiencing an abnormal amount of load, and that can lead to pain. Can lead to, not will lead to, can lead to pain. In the other one, which is more the over rotation and striking in front of center mass, A lot of the time what you see with that is you'll see acute strains of the calf, you'll see acute strains of the rec fem, and acute strains of the hamstring too, because your body or your lower limb is having to contract like pretty forcefully to stabilize, to prevent your center of mass from just falling forward and you falling over. So as a result of that, you are quite tense. So what you need to do is you need to become a little bit more relaxed, and you need to gradually rise a little bit more and learn to have a little bit more pre-tension to hit the ground. But you can only have pre-tension to hit the ground if you actually switch off and relax before that pre-tension. So you need to contract first, push into the ground, and then relax when you're off the ground. And that is something that a lot of athletes struggle with. A lot of muscle-bound athletes, a lot of GA players struggle with it because they want to be on the floor all the time. So as a result of being on the floor all the time, they have to stabilize and they want to be tense and they can't relax. So teaching them to relax is often a way that we can get them faster. And I've outlined in the past some instances where athletes that do struggle with that and are that kind of archetype have hit their PBs when we're running wicket runs or slow accelerations or flying sprints, where we get them to build up over time, where we get them to relax in the air and try to be off the air and try to reduce the effect of the floor acting against them in terms of braking force, which is slowing them down. And those are all nuanced cases, honestly. This is not the same for absolutely everybody, but these are some things that I'm seeing. And like the process of re-education of gait it can be a slow one, not is a slow one. It can be a slow one, especially when the cues that you're using as a coach maybe aren't being grasped to the level that you would like. Sometimes you work with athletes and you just say some stuff and they just pick it up and know exactly what you mean straight away, and they're able to change and alter their movement technique based off of what you've given them verbally. But sometimes in other cases you have to try loads and loads of different cues in order to get the athletes around to seeing what your point of view is and seeing what you want. And then you might have to try even different cues or a range of different cues in order to get them to actually change the way that they're moving, because they mightn't be that type of learner. They might struggle a little bit, but you've got to make that effort as a coach, and you've got to realize that it's not that the athletes are doing it on purpose. They do really, really want to get it, but you've got to try to change your behavior as a coach in order to change their behavior as an athlete. And sometimes the cues that work with absolutely everybody will not work with this one athlete. But are you going to just say to that athlete you can't help them? Absolutely not. You're going to try and use some verbal cues and different anecdotes that will help that athlete in time. And that's being a coach. Like, you have to adapt on the fly. You have to be able to critically think. You need to be able to first see what it is and isolate the area that needs to be worked on and identify what you believe the problem to be and what you believe to be the key thing and the key factor that they need to focus on. You need to focus in on improving that area, and then after that you need to integrate that into the whole chain and make them more efficient and better movers and more effective movers in time. And that's simply it. And that might be or might sound a little bit complicated, and sometimes it can be, but it's not really. And if you're a well-trained coach and you do work at your craft and you hone your craft, then number one goal should always be to try to be able to identify what the issue is first, because if you can't identify what the issue is through your coaching eye or through your tested measures, then unfortunately you're just throwing shit at the wall and hoping something sticks. So I think that's an underdeveloped skill, and it's something that we've been working on with the coaches that are in the Petey Performance Virtual Mentorship, and that has been really fun as well. And I think a lot of the time, similar to me, maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, what younger coaches struggle with is their confidence around their coaching eye. Sometimes they are seeing things that are more right than they are wrong, but it's just like they're not comfortable saying what they're seeing because they're second guessing themselves. And that's a good thing, to second guess yourself, because two things can be true at once, and there may be two things that are correct. Whereas if you're completely adamant that you know what the issue is, then potentially you're at the early stages of the Dunning-Kruger effect. And even me, as I say to the lads that are in the mentorship, even I like struggle from time to time. I'm like, wow, am I actually identifying what the problem is here? Do I have the right train of thought? And in those instances, I have a good network of people to reach out to see if they're seeing similar things. Sometimes they see the exact same thing as me. Sometimes they see what I'm seeing and they see something else. And sometimes they won't see what I'm seeing at all. But that's the value of having a network, and that's the value of knowing that you're not always right and not wanting to be always right. Because it's not important as a coach whether you're right or you're wrong. What's important is that the athlete is helped. So it's important that they're helped by, it doesn't have to be you, it could be another coach. And by having a strong network, you have more access to more different people that will be able to coach that athlete and help that athlete in different scenarios and at different times. Because as I've said in the past, the best coach is the right coach for the right athlete at the right time. And you might be the right coach for that athlete, but at specific times in the process, there may be a different practitioner or a different coach that is going to be better able to help them than you will. And you have to get rid of ego, and you have to be able to do that. And you have to be able to reach out to them. And that's why I have some really good coaches that I enjoy working with, because you've got to be able to collaborate. Like, I'll name check some here because they deserve it. So Alice Lochran has been working with a number of my athletes at the early stage of the rehab return to play process. And Alice works both in person and online, and then she relays the information to me, and then I take up the return to play process and when they're getting back to pitch, because Alice doesn't have the same experience in that regard that I do. So it's a really symbiotic relationship. Like, we work really well together. Then obviously at different stages, I've gone down to David Gray with athletes, and we've collaborated with athletes, and that's been really, really fun. And he's been able to offer his expertise and his coaching eye and what he's seeing, and maybe some touch-ups to the programming that I'm putting in, but then as well as that validation for the programming that I'm putting in, or even just some question around, I don't know why that's in there. Should it be in there? Should I be changing something else? And then I've actually planned to go over to Alan Murdoch in Bath with an athlete in a few weeks, and we're going to tag team that testing process, and we're going to hopefully be getting that athlete back on the pitch as soon as we possibly can and enjoying their rugby too. And like, if I was just on my own and I was a prick and no one wanted to work with me and I wasn't willing to work with anyone else and I had a huge ego, then it's unlikely that any of those athletes would have the same rate of progression in terms of their return to play in their rehab process that they're going to have from having different experts, or different practitioners, shouldn't say experts because that is egotistical, even though all of those people are experts, I would say, and I would probably say I'm not, I'm just a generalist. But having the expertise, maybe is a better way of putting it, from different people in different subject areas to benefit them in the long term and in the short term as well. But you've got to be able to do that. And then something else that I have been thinking about or dealing with a lot in regards to this process, because a lot of what I've just talked about is very systemized. There is a little bit of the soft skills of communication and the soft skills of coaching in there, but you have to see your athletes as people, and injury is a traumatic event, as is being injured, even though I don't like that terminology. I like to change it to my athlete is rehabbing rather than being injured, because I find being injured is a very passive kind of state. It says that it has happened to me, and although it has happened to them and it's no fault of their own, I think that saying that you're rehabbing takes ownership of it, and it kind of elicits a more positive and action orientated mentality where I am taking control of this and control of my own injury, and I'm going to do my best to get back as fast as I possibly can and just do what I can do and not worry about what I can't control. But in regards to the biopsychosocial model, a lot of chronic issues and chronic injuries lead to a lot of negative effects, say, on thought patterns, beliefs, and on your mental health. It does. It's hard on the mental health when you're injured all the time. It definitely is. Like, and when you're sidelined and you're away from your friends, and sometimes teammates or sometimes coaches or opposition or just peers might criticize you. And they do criticize you because they hear it all the time. And that's not nice. Like, it's not a nice place to be in. And you've got to try and block it out, but it's impossible to block it all out. And sometimes you will try to keep up appearances and you will try to push through it just to give them the two fingers, I suppose, and show them that you're not soft. And although there is definite scope and importance in being able to push through certain pain thresholds in the rehab process and the return to play process, it does come with a risk in that if you push too far through it, then unfortunately your risk of injury or your risk of a flare-up is higher, and as I touched on earlier. So it's a fine balance between doing just enough to, well, not just enough, but enough to elicit adaptation and get better, but not too much that you end up taking 2 steps back, or you have to take a bit of a deload essentially and back off a little bit because you've pushed too much or pushed too hard. So like, dealing with the person, dealing with their beliefs and being somebody that's empathetic and easy to talk to, and maybe being able to challenge some of their beliefs in the right way and being able to help them to see that there is light at the end of the tunnel and be a little bit more optimistic at times in regards to them coming back. Maybe optimistic is no, I don't think it's the wrong way to put it. I think being optimistic in terms of there is the chance, and it is realistic, that you will come back from this injury in time. And if you do the right things, it would be unlikely, or it is less likely that you will not come back from this issue or this injury or this chronic hand that you've been dealt. And if you do that day after day and you're consistent with it, then the likelihood that you will come back to play a stronger, more robust athlete, faster athlete, a better athlete is going to be greater. So you might as well have a crack at it, and you might as well give it what you've got, but not put obviously too much of an emphasis on it being a perfect process, because it's never going to be a perfect process. But you are a strong person, you have the coping skills, and you have the strength of will and the strength of character to be able to cope with the odd setback. And if you know that there will be setbacks, it manages your expectations, and it allows you to, when the setbacks do occur, to just say, look, I knew this was going to happen, but I'm a strong individual. I'm a person that's capable. I have strong coping skills. I have a good coach. I have good friends. I have good peers. I have good teammates. I'm in no rush. I can address this and I can come back a better athlete from this. And look, there might be another setback down the line. There might not be, but I have ownership, and I take ownership for my own performance and my own rehab. And all that I can do is do better every single day and put into place the actions that are going to lead to me being more likely to come back from this issue and this injury quicker. And if you're somebody that needed that pep talk, then take it and try to be a little bit more positive about where you are, but know that it's not going to be plain sailing all the time, and it never is for anybody, not even the pros, not even for the elite level GAA players. It's never like 100%. I am fresh, I am back in 5-6 weeks. And it's why now I think we've got away from giving these timelines on injuries of you're going to be out for this amount of time, because that's very passive. It kind of just states that, look, if you do nothing over this amount of time and you just rest and you sit out, you don't play games and you don't play matches, by the time that you get back, your body will be healed. And that's not really the way the body works, because the healing process generally for the injuries that you're going to see in the acute kind of grade 1 to grade 2, they're going to heal a little bit quicker than the 6 to 8 week timelines that people are giving you. But you don't want them to just heal. You want them to adapt to be stronger than they were previously. And that is going to be quite an extensive process. And if you get back to the state that you were in when you got injured, what's the likelihood that you'll get injured again when you're in that state? Probably pretty high. Whereas if you come back stronger, faster, fitter, the likelihood is going to be reduced that you're going to get injured. So that's got to be the goal. And that's a challenging thing to navigate, that mental side of the training, but you've got to just be a good person and be a good friend and a good helper, I guess, to these people. And you've got to be willing to understand that what they're going through is traumatic and understand what they're going through is tough and it's difficult, and let them know that you know that it is difficult and you know that it is frustrating. And if you've been there yourself, then you can empathize with them and you can put yourself in their shoes absolutely, like, straight away. So it's important that you do so, but it's not about you, it's about them. So you got to listen to their problems, you got to listen to what they're feeling, what they're thinking and what their frustrations are. And once you do that, you're going to have more of an opportunity to connect with the athlete, and they'll have more of an opportunity to connect and bond with you. And then there's going to be a little bit of more mutual trust and respect there. So then they're likely or more likely to buy into the process as a result. And that is something that we've been going through in the mentorship as well. Like, so the mentorship is running really, really well. Like, I've been really happy with it. I'm just laughing because it's a bit surreal, like, to be doing a mentorship and for it to be running really, really well. But the last couple of weeks, like, the content has been all around that, communicating with athletes and communicating with management. And then it's been about leadership, culture and goal setting as well, which is quite appropriate given last week's podcast around my experience with the New Zealand Sevens, who I'll give a shout out to them and to Peter Hughes actually before I move on. Both the men and women's teams for New Zealand won the Hong Kong Sevens, which is like a pivotal and really like top level competition, and like it's a huge part of the Sevens calendar. I think it's one of the oldest competitions that's there for Sevens, and as a result, like, it's a real privilege to win it. And they won it, both men and women, last year and this year as well. So I don't think it's much of a coincidence that their culture is so in order, they're so together, and everybody's singing it off the same hymn sheet, and then they're going to win these big tournaments. And hopefully we can see more of that come Olympics time, and hopefully I'll give Sarah a shout as well. Hopefully we will see her back on the pitch soon too, and doing her best to go and get that gold medal. But in regards to the communicating with athletes and management, we chatted a lot about being open, being vulnerable. We talked about some pieces of literature that I've read through the years that have affected my coaching process and my communication process, or how I communicate. And they may not be ones that are kind of taught to you in a textbook or taught to you in college or in university or third level university, but we did go into some stuff that Nick Wickelman has put out as well around language and the power of language and the importance of cueing external and external versus internal for different tasks. Also around tone, also around how communication is not just verbal, it's not just what you say, it's how you say it, it's your body language, it's your tone, it's all of these things, but it's also the words that you use too, and the power of words, and how we need to be careful with our language, and we have to really define our terms that we use, because if we don't define them and we can't define them for our athletes, then how are our athletes could be expected to be able to understand what we want them to do? That was really well received, and we had a class group call with everybody chiming in regards to what they gained from that and the different problems that they have had dealing or communicating with different types of athletes and different types of coaches and managers and teammates. And then we helped each other, I guess. We had a chat around strategies that other people have used in different scenarios, and we had a chat around different tactics for achieving change and different tactics for getting people on board and different tactics for connection. And just because it's going to be harder to connect with some athletes and some people than it is with others. You have more in common with some people than you do with others. But as a coach, you've got to be able to connect with all of the athletes in the group, albeit there'll be some connections that are a little bit deeper than others and a little bit more meaningful than others. But that doesn't mean that you can just push the other athletes to the side. You've got to be able to be the person and speak in a language that suits the right athlete that is in front of you, and put on a different hat or a different coaching hat for each different athlete. Know what motivates your athletes. Ask good questions. Know what's important to them. As I went through last week, know their family. Know what really gets them going. Know why they play the game. Know what it is that they enjoy doing outside of playing the game. And as a result of getting to know them a little bit better, you'll be able to develop a little bit stronger connections, but you'll also have a pool of knowledge that you can pull back on in order to use language that they enjoy in order to get more out of them, or language that they understand. Like if one of your athletes is really into playing video games, like using language like level up or access the next level or a boost or a speed boost or language from Mario Kart might be useful in order to get them to understand what it is you want them to do, or in order to motivate them to really put in the intent that you'd like them to put in order to access that next level. And I know that's something that the guys from the Magic Circle spoke about with us out in Singapore when I was coaching rugby many years ago, and I thought it was so useful, especially for younger athletes who obviously play a lot more video games than older athletes. I'm laughing now because potentially that's not the case, given some of the athletes that I've coached down through the years, the gamers. But yeah, like that's the type of stuff that we're going through. And then this last week was a great one, like a wealth of content that I went through, I suppose. And the topic of conversation was creating culture, leadership, and goal setting. So I went through my process, obviously, for goal setting at the end and why we do it, and pretty similar to what a lot of people do in terms of process, but maybe slightly different in terms of how I tease it out of the teams that I'm working with, or out of the athletes that I'm working with. But then going through leadership is something that I spoke about with Ian Reeves, actually in depth at the turn of the year before New Year's last year, 2023. And obviously that's a specialty of his, and it's something that we went really deep on, and I gained some great insights from him on. And then the culture aspect, I kind of had to question, obviously, what culture is, but then who have been the influences on me in terms of creating culture. So I've read tons of business books, tons of coaching books, sports books down through the years. And I realized going through it, all of those different coaches or those different CEOs or leaders have all left a different legacy with me in terms of what I've learned from them and what I've tried to apply from them in how I work with teams and how I work with athletes. So I thought it was useful to compile the different lessons that each of them have taught me. Now, we're yet to have our group call this week. We might have to push it back because there was so much content in there, but I'm interested to hear what the lads have to say around what they took from those different areas, because some of them are commonly obviously heard or talked about, but there's so many commonalities between each of them. It was quite interesting, but there are slight differences as well. So like the books, this might be useful as well for some people that are listening. So the book list that I gave out was Legacy by James Kerr, about the All Blacks, absolutely top quality. Belonging by Owen Eastwood, which I think Gareth Southgate used to great effect as well. And then I thought it was class for working in the GAA because it's all about belonging to the group and how the group mentality kind of impacts the individual, and how people need to trust each other or feel valued and feel like they belong before they're going to give it 100%, and before you can really judge them in terms of if they're delivering on what they can deliver, and on if they're reaching their potential or even what their potential is. Then I had The Score Takes Care of Itself by Bill Walsh, which I absolutely love. Wooden on Leadership, John Wooden, your favourite coach's favourite coach. Really simple principles. I had 11 Rings by Phil Jackson, a class one. How to Think by Alex Ferguson. Quiet Leadership, Carlo Ancelotti. Actually, How to Think Like Alex Ferguson is not by Alex Ferguson, it's by Damien Hughes, but it's class. I had other ones by Dan Carter, Art of Winning, Start With Why, Simon Sinek, Barca, The Rise and Fall, Simon Cooper, which I'm absolutely Barcelona obsessed, so I love that book. I thought it was class. It shows you exactly how to build a culture and how to keep it going, but how not to keep it going as well, because obviously the fall of Barcelona over the last few years has been pretty tragic and pretty monumental, so it offers a lot of insight into what they changed and why that didn't work, or theories around why it didn't work. Johan Cruyff, who I'm a huge fan of, always have been since I was a young lad. His autobiography, My Turn, is class. And then the No Rules, Netflix and the Culture of Reinvention, I found to be really, really interesting as well, around not having that many rules in an organization in order to get the most out of the people that you have in the building, but also recruitment and recruiting really, really good people being obviously a great measurable for a successful business. So yeah, like obviously there's loads of content there in that lecture. Interested to see how the guys found that. But yeah, everybody seems to be really enjoying the mentorship, and I'm enjoying it as well. I've enjoyed putting it together, and you can see how if I went through all of that and tried to condense it down into a 2-hour lecture as I did, I'm going to be able to put my thoughts down on paper, and then I'm going to be clearer in my thoughts, and I'm going to have more of an ability to reflect back on what I've learned. And then from reflecting back on what I've learned, I'm going to be stronger in terms of my implementation of that going forward. And I'll be able to go back to the literature, go back to my content around my presentation and just checklist it and see if I am actually living it and if I am implementing it and if I am being successful. So that is the value in the mentorship. I think next week we're going through in-season S&C, so it's not been all soft skills because there are obviously hard skills to sports science, strength and conditioning, athletic development, whatever it is, whatever the terminology is that you want to put on it, even though language is important. But yeah, I've been really, really enjoying it. And then with the backdoor cut, obviously making more of an effort to go up to Ulster as the two lads prepare for the Ulster Championship with Fermanagh and Antrim, Dara McGurn and Owen McCabe. Fingers crossed that the lads can be successful in their charge. And hopefully getting around the country to different areas to interview some really good guests in terms of coaches and athletes. I've had some great suggestions in recent weeks from coaches that I've met. If you have any suggestions of people that you'd like to hear from on the podcast or you'd like to hear me interview, then send them through. If you have any feedback on the podcast, send it through too. I'm going to definitely be putting out more Q&As, I think, for the podcast, for questions that I can go into a little bit more detail on. And hopefully you guys can get more value from those detailed answers or those detailed kind of monologues or whatever you want to call them. That's going to be a conscious effort of me in the coming weeks. But I have a couple of guest episodes coming, as I said, that I'm really excited about. So lots of exciting things. In-person coaching, podcast rolling well, hopefully leveling up the content and back in Ireland in the wind and the rain. But happy to be here. I currently have 3 slots available in the Petey Performance Premium Pack for athletes that want to level up their performance at this stage of the season, maybe ramp up in terms of their speed, ramp up in terms of their game speed ability, their change of direction ability. If they're trying to recover from a persistent niggly injury, be it chronic, be it acute or repetitive strain, then I'd be happy to help in that regard. And obviously the athletes have been achieving some great success, with some of them returning to inter-county duty, which has been absolutely class. Some of them returning to club duty, which has been class. Some of them hitting PBs as well in terms of their max speeds too. And some of them having a little bit more challenging time, but they will get there in time as well. So if you want to be one of those athletes that is going to get there in time, then reach out with the DM to my Instagram or whatever channel and just say premium, and you can maybe grab one of those spots before they're all gone. And then with the in-person coaching, if you'd be interested in me coming to your area of the country and running an in-person session, then make sure you reach out. Just say in person and I will be happy to have a conversation with you. And if it's feasible to get up to that area of the country and feasible to rent some facility or some area to do so, then I'll be sure to do so, and maybe we could make a great day of it. So other than that, I hope you all enjoyed the content, and if you did enjoy it, then please remember to like it, share it, and send it.